والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وله. I'd like to welcome you all to this second lecture of week 10 of ICS 104. Any questions before we proceed? Okay, very good. So let me share the screen with you. Okay, so is it visible يا شباب? Trying to do you see the slide?
Yes, we do.
Okay, very good. Right. So we started discussing the other day, how do we read a file? And we basically looked at how to read lines. Now we would look into how can we read multiple lines of a file. Now, first of all, do you remember what happens if we reach the end of file? If I try to read beyond, the end of file, what will happen? Hello? شكلكم حتزعلوني اليوم.
معلش السؤال يا دكتور.
The question is, if we reach the end of file, what does Python read when we use read line?
empty string.
The empty string, right? The empty string. So this gives us an idea. How can we read multiple lines? Well, we can keep reading lines as long as we don't read an empty string. صح ولا لا? We can keep reading lines as long as we are not reading an empty string. As long as we are not reading an empty string. So basically, this is how we can read multiple lines, right? This is how we can read multiple lines. So basically, we can use the read line, and we can print. And while the line is not equal to empty, line equal in file.read line, and we will print. Okay. Right. Now, who's going to tell me what is this? Why do we need this?
To print it in one line.
To print it in one line. In how? What does this do? والله شكله هتزعلوني مظبوط منكم اليوم. يا شباب, we covered this when we took loops, especially when we talked about nested loop. This will basically by default, the print statement. What does the print statement do by default?
It ends the program. So this makes it do the print command and then continue after.
It will print and then go to the next line.
By default, the print statement will print whatever is, in the argument, or if there is nothing in the argument, it will not print anything. And then by default, it will print a new line. صح? This will change that default. So instead of end equal \n, which is the default, which we don't need to specify, if you say end equal the empty string, it will not add an end of line. So, we took, day before yesterday, that the read line function will read including the end of line, the \n. Okay, will read including the \n. So this will basically, when we see the output, instead of having, lines, empty lines between each line, it will basically avoid that. Okay, it will basically avoid that. By the way, this is basically I think we tried something the other day regarding Unicode, صح? Maybe I should remove that. I should remove that line from the input file. Okay. So basically, this way we don't see, a line between flying and circuits because of that default. Okay, that's what is this used for. So as with the input function, the readline method can return only strings. By the way, this is again, and I'm saying it again, the beauty behind, file reading in Python is that it's basically exactly similar to the input. Okay, exactly similar to the input function. Everything you read is a string, and then what Python does is it provides, a wealth of string functions and methods that you can utilize, to basically read whatever you would like to read from a file. Okay, so for example, if the file contains numeric data, the strings must be converted to the numerical value using the int or the float function, exactly like the input, function. Okay, so for example, you can say value equal float line. You read the line contains a single floating point number, so you can just say value equal float line, and it will read the floating point number. Right. So this is regarding reading lines from a file or part of it. We will continue in a few minutes. But let's now a little bit talk about writing to a file. How do we write to a file? Okay. Right. Usually, what do we do to write something on the screen? To write something on the screen, what do we do?
We print.
We print. We use the print. We use the print function. Right. Now, if I want to write to a file, I will use the file object that I have created along with the write method. Okay, along with the write method. Now, the argument inside is exactly similar to the arguments of the print function. Okay, to the arguments of the print function. The only thing is we might need to add the \n or the new line, right? So for example, we can write the string hello world to our output file, using the following statement. Out file equal open output.txt and w is for writing. And then we can write, hello world \n and then close the file. Right. So let's look at the, do we have here an output.txt? We don't have an output.txt. So what will this do? Well, this will generate an error, because it's not there, right?
No, it will create a file.
It will create a file called output.txt. It will create a file called output.txt. So now if we come here, well, we see now there is a file called output, and if I open it using Notepad, you can see that this has been written as hello world, and a new line was added actually, right? Because I put the right arrow, I pressed the right arrow key, and it went down. So this means that it copied basically both the hello world and the new line, okay, and the new line. So whatever you put inside the right is basically similar to whatever you put inside the print, and we will see that inshallah in a second. Okay, so for example, let's look at this example here. Suppose you are given a text file that contains a sequence of floating point values stored one value per line. So they are stored one value per line. We need to read the values and write them to an U output file aligned in a column and followed by their total and average values. Right. So now, as input, what do I have? I only have the floating point values, right? One in each line. Right. I need to compute the total and the average. Can anybody tell me very quickly, what do I need to compute the total and the average? What do you need to do in your program to compute the total and the average?
You need to sum them, then divide by their number.
Sum them. So you need to define a new variable, in which you basically every time you read a value, you sum it in that variable. مظبوط؟ طيب. والaverage?
Sum and then divide.
Divide by what?
By the number of inputs.
So how are you going to get the number of inputs?
By increasing a counter on a loop.
So you need to define a variable, a counter variable, and you need to add it every time you read, right? You need to add it every time you read. Well, this is basically, the input file, and this is what the output file should be. It should be, right aligned with a nice, set of hyphens here, and then total and average. Now, how do we do that? Well, it's kind of very simple. Well, this is, how to read, and these are the definitions of the file objects for reading and writing. And we are going to use input1.txt and output1.txt, okay? And then this is the two new variables, total and count, okay? And here we will say, line equal infile.readLine. This is when we read the first line. And while that line is not equal to empty, what do? I convert the line into a float. It's just exactly like the input function, صح? And then look at this, outfile.write, look at this, %15.2f \n, percent, the format string operator, and then value. So this is exactly the same as what one might have used inside a print function. The only difference is we need to worry about the \n explicitly. We need to worry about the \n explicitly. The print function by default prints a \n. Here we have to worry about it. Okay, and then of course you add the value to total, you add 1 to count, and you read the next line. And this is basically the body of the while loop. Okay, and here you basically write the hyphens, and you write the total, and you compute the average after dividing by count, and you define the average, or you write actually the average. Right. Now, how do you determine, total, %8.2f, and here it is %6.2f? Well, I wouldn't, expect everyone to get this maybe from the first attempt. You might try it once and twice. You will see the output, and then you can adjust it. Okay, but if you are very careful, if you compute, for example, you know, how many characters does this total along with the space is, you can basically, you know, subtract from the 15 and make sure that all of them are right aligned. And we can make sure that all of them are right aligned. So let's first look at the input file. Well, the input file is input1.txt. This is the input1.txt, by the way. It has the 32, 54, 67 until 115. And of course, we don't have an output1.txt, so this will be generated after we run the code. So if we run the code here, let me say input1.txt, and the output file is output1.txt. So now, if we go to the output file, this is the output1.txt. Now, as you can see, it has pretty printed, you know, the numbers, and then we printed the hyphens, and then we printed the total and the average, and all of them are right aligned. All of them are right aligned. Okay. Any question, ya shabab? Any question? Right, very good. Okay. Right. So we saw that, you know, in order to, you know, read multiple lines from a file, I can use while, and the input is not equal to the empty string. The input line is not equal to the empty string. There is another elegant way of reading lines in a file, and that is using basically the for loop with the end. The for loop with the end, right? So when I do this, when I say for line in file, what does this line do? Well, what this line will do is the following. It will take each line in file and it will save it in line for each iteration. So in the first time I enter the for loop, the variable line will be initialized to the first line in the file up to the \n, up to the \n, right? Up to and including the \n, and it will do that until we reach until basically reading the last line, until basically reading the last line. Right. Do you remember what was input.txt containing? It was containing two lines, flying or circus, صح? Flying and circus. So now what will happen, or what does this program do? It will basically read a line from the file and it will show it to us on the screen, صح ولا لا? Right? طيب. Let's see what happened. Can anybody explain why do we have this empty line? As you can see, we have one empty line between flying and circus. ليش?
Because the backslash of it,
Because of أيوة عبد الحميد.
of backslash n that in the input text.
That is in the line, exactly. So it is basically the \n is printed, which is part of the line, and then another end of line is printed by default from the print. So if I want to print them without these lines, then what I can do is just say, you know, end equal empty, and if I run it, of course they will disappear. Okay, right. So note that they are displayed with a black line between each word. To remove the new line character, of course, and I use this, you know, to remove the new line character. But now let's talk about, you know, the wealth of, you know, the string methods that exist in Python. There is another way of removing the end of line character, and that is basically using the rstrip method. The rstrip method. Now, the rstrip method, first of all, the R stands for right strip, meaning, you know, you are stripping from the right, okay, from the end of from the string. And what do you think if I want to strip from the beginning? What do you think Python will call it?
L strip.
L strip, left, from the left, from the beginning, right? So what does it do? The rstrip method removes all trailing white spaces, all the white spaces at the end, until you reach the first non-white space character from the right. So all tabs, all spaces, all new lines will be removed from the end of the string when called without an argument. When we call it like this, rstrip without an argument, all white spaces are removed. Okay, right. What if you supply an argument? If you supply an argument which is in the form of a string, it will remove every character in the string from the end. Okay, it will remove every character in the string from the end. طيب, does that include the white space characters? No. Once you specify the argument, then if you want the white spaces, you have to include them explicitly. If you want the white spaces, you have to include them explicitly. Okay, so as we can see now, if we apply the line equal line dot rstrip, line equal line dot rstrip, right? And then we print the line, then we will also see it without any new line in between, because the new line has been truncated from the input string or from the line. واضح يا شباب? Any question? So this is a very elegant way of reading a file. When you read every line like this, using for line in file, and this is great. I don't think that we will see how to read files in C, but if inshallah, when we talk about C, we will not cover input and output files. But after you learn C, go ahead and read about how does C read files. Wallahi, you will appreciate Python. Okay, you will appreciate Python. Right. Somebody had a question.
Doctor, how can I print them in one line without rstrip?
You want to print all the lines in one line?
Yes.
Wallahi, this is a very nice exam question. And anybody can answer him. How can I print all the lines in one line using or without using the rstrip?
Maybe use the rstrip and the end.empty string together.
And the end dot empty string. لا, بس the end dot empty string will just, yeah, it will avoid. Yes, you're right. This is one way. Very good. So basically, if he says, use it like this, right? Use it like this, and it will print it in one line. What I had in mind was you can say line equal line dot rstrip, right? And then you can say, all. You can define another variable, okay, which is called, all lines equals all lines. Fine. صح ولا لا? This will also make them all in a single line without anything in between. صح ولا لا?
ايه صحيح يا دكتور.
Okay.
بس ما اقدر اسويها بدون الار ستريب.
بدون الار strip, I'm not sure how you can do it. There might be a way of using it without the R strip, but I'm not aware of it. Okay.
اوكي يعطيك العافيه.
الله يعافيك. طيب. Okay. Now, sometimes we might want to read words, right? We might want to read words. For example, look at this input file. Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow. In fact, this is part of this file, which is 7.2.2, right? This file here contains these two lines. Assume that you wanted to print each word in a single line. Now, again, does Python provide a method to read a file word by word? The answer is no. The answer is no. But it provides, again, you know, the strength of the string library functions, the library, the string methods. It has a very nice string method, which is called the split. Okay, which is called the split method. What does the split method do? The split method does the following. If you apply it on a line, it will actually extract the words that are separated by white spaces, and it will store them in a list. Okay, it will store them in a list. So when you say for line in file, you know, word list equal line dot split. So what did it do here? Well, what it does is it will save the whole line. First of all, what does the split do? Well, the split takes the line, and whenever there is a white space, it will, you know, remove it, and it will store whatever is before it, you know, as the first element in the list. And then once it finds the next non-white space character, it will continue until it finds the white space. It will store the next string as the next element in the list, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. So here, if we output the word list, what will be basically output? Well, we will see that, you know, two lists containing the strings in each line. So this is the first list, and this is the second. Like, let me ask you a question to see whether you are with me ولا مع الأسف. How come the new line is not printed? How come the new line is not printed?
It's a space, so it will be removed.
It's a white space. It will be removed. Okay, the white. So white spaces include the new lines, tabs, and spaces, and spaces. Right. So now, if I want to print each word in a line, what should I do, ya shabab? What
Use
should
for
I do?
loop.
Use the for loop on the list. Use the for loop on the list. صح? So look at this beauty. You know, for line in file. So now the variable line will contain each line in a file. طيب, word list equal line dot split. So now word list is a list. Well, as a list, I can use a for loop on it. So for word in word list. So now I can take each word in the word list, and now I can process it. And now I can process it. Now, in my opinion, you know, this way of handling words using exactly, you know, the concept of reading the whole line to me is very elegant. Okay, and very consistent. I just need to use my string methods. I just need to use my string methods, and you can see here that, you know, I'm printing the words, each word in a line. Okay, each word in a line. Right. Do you notice that in some words the punctuation is being printed? You know, the dot, the comma. Do you have any idea how we can remove them? What do you suggest to remove the punctuation? Hint, it's a string method that we saw today. Another hint, it starts with an R.
R strip.
R strip. R strip. Huh? R strip. And in this case, we know that the strings do not contain any white space because we used the split method. It doesn't contain any white space. So all what you need to do is just specify the punctuation, right? You just need to specify the punctuation. So you just need to do this, you know, include the dot, the comma, question mark, and the exclamation mark. Now, once you do that, now if we print, you will see that, you know, each word is actually printed in a single line without any punctuation. Without any punctuation. Is that clear, ya shabab? Any question? Right. Now, as far as reading characters is concerned, Python does provide a way to read characters. Okay. Basically using something which is called the read method. The read method takes a single argument that specifies the number of characters to read. That specifies the number of characters to read. It basically returns a string containing the characters. Basically returns a string containing the characters. So for example, when we say character equal input file dot read, and then we specify 1. What does it do? Well, starting from the where the file marker is, it will read, you know, that number of characters, which is in this case 1 character, and will save it in a string. Okay. Now, so the method returns a string consisting of the next character in the file. طيب, if I reach the end of file, what does it return? What do you think it will return? What do you think it will return?
An empty string.
It will return the empty string. Okay, it will return the empty. It will return the empty string. So, for example, this code is supposedly going to take each character, right? Character equal input file dot read 1, and print it. So it should print each character on a single line. It should print each character on a single line. Again, on the input text dot text, which contains flying and circuit, right? So if we run this, what does it print? Oh, where is the F? Where is the F?
Which F?
The F of the flying. طلع
It's index 0, so it won't print it.
So why? I want to print it. I want to read each character. What do you mean it's index 0, so it will not print it? شو دخل? يعني what's the relationship with index 0 with me printing it or not printing it? And I want it. I want it to be printed. Why is it not printing? Look at the code.
The read print the next character. So if you want to print the second character, it will print the third character. It will skip the character that you want. I think that.
No, but skip. What do you mean skip? And I want to read all of them. Currently, the input is wrong. The output is wrong. صح؟ أنا I need FLYING space مش space يعني end of line and then CI whatever. It's not printing the F. Look at the code.
I think you should put 0 inside the read.
No, read. This specifies how many characters to read. So each time you read 1 character. Why is it not printing the F? Is it reading the F? ايش رايكم يا شباب؟
I think yes.
It's reading the F. Why it's not printing it? ترى ما شاء الله, the other section was much faster than you. He found the answer much faster than you, صراحة.
Maybe because the first character is empty.
No, what do you mean the first character is empty? The first character is F. If the first character is empty, it will go outside the while loop, it will not print anything.
Maybe when we join the while loop, the character value will be updated to all.
أيوة. See, احنا we start reading before the while loop. We start reading before the while loop. Now, inside the while loop, the first thing to do is I'm reading again. So now I lost the first character. I did not print it. So how can I fix the code in order to print the first character?
Swap
Comment line 2.
swap it with the print.
Swap this with the print, right? Swap this with the print. So once you enter, print the character, and then character equal input file dot read one. Okay. So now if I run this, well, now it's printing properly. Okay. Now it's printing properly. Right. Now, what if the line contains a record? Okay, contains a record. For example, a file containing student data may consist of records composed of fields like the ID number, the full name, the address, the class year. And another example, for example, if you are a file containing bank account transactions, may contain the transaction date, description, amount. You would like to read this type of things. Well, how can you do that? Well, you can basically read each record, whether it is in a single line or in multiple lines, and utilize the string methods, rstrip, split, you utilize all the methods, and depending on the formatting of, the input file, you can basically process. Okay, we will not discuss it, we will not give any, a specific example here, but basically, hopefully you will do that in the lab. Okay, so for each record in the file, you first read the entire record, and then you process that record with whatever that processing is, Right. So with this, we are done with the file input output. Now let's go to another important subject, which is exception handling. Now, whenever we run a program, there are cases where something wrong happens that generates, for example, a runtime error. Okay, right. How do we deal with those runtime errors? Well, we until now, what we did was we did not deal with them. And if there is, for example, division by 0, خلاص, the program will crash, so that's it. طيب, is this good? Well, of course, this is not good. Huh? Of course, this is not good. So how do we? What does Python provide? In order to better deal with these situations. Well, it provides something which is called exception handling. Okay. Now, exception handling consists of two things. It has two aspects. The first aspect is error detection. And the second aspect is error handling. Okay, error detection and error handling. For example, the open function may detect an attempt to read from a non-existent file. If you try to open a file for reading, and that file does not exist. So it will detect the error, right? And it will show you the error, and it will go outside the program. It will go outside the program, right? So it does not handle that error. It detects the error, but it does not handle it. Now, a satisfactory way of handling the error might be to terminate the program or to ask the user for another file name. And this is what we will do. The better solution is that we should not, terminate the program and then rerun the program again in order to input the right file name. No. The program should allow me more than one chance until I enter the right file name. So the open function currently cannot choose between these alternatives. right? It needs to report the error to basically another part of the program, okay, which is basically the exception handler, So in Python, exception handling provides a flexible mechanism for passing control from the point of error detection to a handler that can deal with the error, okay, that can deal with the error. So the first thing that we need to talk about is first to detect the error or to raise the error, right? So when you detect an error condition, your job is really easy. You just need to raise an appropriate exception, and you are done. For example, if you remember, if you recall the bank account, withdrawal example, usually we would like to withdraw an amount that is less than what is available in the balance, right? طيب, what if somebody tries to withdraw an amount greater than the balance? Well, what we would like to, in this case, to handle this type of error, huh? So we first need to look for an appropriate exception. We need to raise, an appropriate error that describes the situation, right? That describes the situation. Now, luckily, Python library provides a number of standard exceptions to signal all sorts of exception conditions. In fact, these are the exceptions. So the most general is exception, and then it consists of warning and the standard error. And under the standard error, the more specialized exceptions are like environment error, IO, which has IO error. By the way, this is generated because of file input, for example, when you try to read a file or open a file that does not exist. Then you have arithmetic error. And in particular, for example, you can have overflow or zero division. All these are exceptions, okay? And you can use any one of them. Runtime error, type error, value error, lookup error, which is basically index error or key error. By the way, index error, you think is associated with what? An index error. What do you think? It will be related to what? What are the things that have indices that we have learned?
Lists.
Also strings, by the way. Also strings, right? Key error. طيب, والkey error, where do we learn keys? Where did we learn keys?
Dictionaries.
Dictionaries. If the key is not there, it will raise a key error. Huh? So look around for an exception type that might describe your situation. So regarding, the amount, if I want to withdraw more than what is in the balance, is arithmetic error exception suitable? In other words, is it an arithmetic error to have a negative balance? Yani if we have a negative balance, do you consider this as an arithmetic error?
No.
No, it's not.
Hmm.
It's I mean, negative numbers are part of the integers, صح ولا لا?
صح.
Yeah, negative numbers are part of integers, and negative numbers are part of floats. So it's not a big deal. It's not really an arithmetic error. طيب, look at the errors here, يا شباب. What do you think? Which one is really, better to use? For the amount, the balance becoming negative. What should we use in that case?
Value error.
Value error. The value is not allowed. Well, that makes sense. Right? So so a value error is actually better. And here, for example, if amount is greater than balance, then what we can do is we can raise a value error which says amount exceeds balance. Okay, and if we run this, you will see that a value error was raised. and the program terminated in not a very good way. So until now, we know how to, raise an error. But this is not really what we need to do. What we need to do is we need to handle it. What we need to do is we need to handle it. We need to tell the programmer, by the way, the amount that you entered is wrong. Please enter an amount which is less than the balance. So how do we do that? We do that using the try except block, right? Using the try except block. Now, before the try except block, let's just talk about the raise exception. So basically, raise basically creates a new exception object that is raised, right? Of type, the type of the exception is here value error, right? And this is a message that is printed, which is associated with the exception object, right? With the exception object. And if we execute this, execution will terminate. If we don't handle it somewhere else, execution will terminate. So this line is not executed when the exception is raised. So every exception, needs to be handled somewhere in our program. It's not only raising the exception, it's handling the exception, right? Because as we have seen, if we do not handle the exception, it will terminate the program. And this is not good. So how do we handle exception? We said using a try except statement. So what we will do is, in the try except statement is the following. In the try block, we will include the statements that will cause the errors, or that may cause exception. And in each except, we will handle them. In each except, we will handle them. So let's look at this code. So this is the try block. I need somebody to tell me what possible errors might happen because of this try block. There are, in fact, two. If you read the code, in total, you will immediately realize what are the two possible exceptions that can happen because of this block.
The file name does not exist.
The file name does not exist. And this is, by the way, related to the IO error. Okay, so if the file name does not exist, what will this statement do? This will raise the IO error. Right, what is the second one? Hint, it's in line 5. What error can generate from line 5?
We cannot convert the characters to integer.
Yes, if there is a letter, or if there was a float, Huh? In that case, you will not be able to generate to convert it to an integer. So in that case, what will happen? Well, in that case, the int function will generate or would raise a value error exception. طيب, where is it handled? Well, it is handled here, except value error. Okay, except value error. And here we say as exception, which is basically stored in the exception variable. And what do we do in this case? Well, all what we do here is just print, error, and then str exception. Okay, str exception. So for example, let's try to run this code. And let's use input1.text. Remember input1.text contains floating point numbers. صح? It contains floating point numbers. So if I write here input1.text, now which one will generate the error here? The file name or the value equal int line?
The value.
The value equal int line, صح? If I do this, look at what happened. You know, error, and then invalid literal for int with base 10. Invalid literal for int with base 10. So all these are inside the exception, and the line which caused it is actually the first line that contains 32.0. So did the program
The exception, where is the exception? Where does it store it?
it is stored now in this variable, and
Yeah.
and this is the handling, basically this print. As you can see,
Where is the value for the exception?
oh, the value is in the file input1.txt. Ayha. The first file. It cannot convert this into an integer.
Oh, okay.
Okay. واضح يا شباب? And similarly, if I run this and I put a file that does not exist, and I put the file that it just says, you know, error, file not found. So it did not, you know, stop in a very harsh way, you know, showing that there is a big, you know, there is a crash in the program. No, I know that, you know, something can go wrong, and this is what I did. I just print error, file not found. I just print error, file not found. So inshallah, next time we will look at the general syntax of the exception handling, and we will go into more details, you know, and we will see a better, you know, examples of how to handle, you know, exception, of how to handle exception. واضح يا شباب? Any question? Any question? طيب. So we will stop here. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. إن شاء الله we will see you بإذن الله next week. السلام عليكم.